A cold autumn night had fallen over the outskirts of the city. In an old abandoned shed, a 12-year-old boy curled up into a ball, shivering from the damp wind. His name was Daniel, but everyone at the orphanage just called him Danny. Earlier that day, he had run away, unable to bear the dull pain, the loss, and the indifference around him. Now Danny pressed his back against the damp wooden wall of the shed, trying to keep warm under a worn-out jacket that wasn't even his. Somewhere in the cracks, the wind howled, and a broken window shutter rattled. An ache settled deep in his chest. He was hungry, cold, and scared, but what hurt the most was the thought that he was completely alone. In the dim light of a distant street lamp streaming through the gaps in the walls, he could make out the vague shapes of old barrels and boxes on the shed floor. Mice or maybe rats rustled in the corner, and Danny shivered in disgust, trying not to move. He couldn't fall asleep, though his eyes were heavy with exhaustion. Images from the past week kept flashing before him, refusing to let him rest. Just a few days ago, he had a family and a home. But disaster struck without warning. Danny remembered waking up that night to loud noises and the sharp smell of smoke. Their small house in Maplewood was shaking, almost like there was an earthquake. He heard his mother screaming somewhere in the distance. Danny ran outside. Blinded by smoke, he couldn't see anything. All he heard was coughing and his parents' voices somewhere below the floor. Then a powerful jolt threw him against the wall, and a white flash exploded before his eyes. After that, nothing. He woke up later in the yard, under the open sky, covered in dust and splinters. Neighbors stood over him, worried. The house had collapsed, broken pieces were scattered everywhere, and the air was thick with smoke. Danny's head spun, but as soon as he came to, he asked, "Where's Mom? Where's Dad?" The neighbor holding his hand stayed silent, just stroked his head gently. Her eyes said everything, and Danny screamed in terror. "No, no, please, no." Later, he heard the adults whispering by the wreckage, saying his parents were probably trapped under the fallen beams and never made it out. The rescue team searched but didn't find anyone. Some people thought maybe his mom and dad had escaped in shock and lost their memory, but the police decided otherwise. Most likely, they died in the fire, and nothing was left to find. In a single moment, Danny lost everything. His parents were officially declared missing, and he was sent to an orphanage as a foster kid. It was warm and there was food, but his soul felt frozen. He refused to believe his parents wouldn't come back. Every night, Danny stared out the bedroom window, waiting to see their familiar silhouettes at the gate. He kept imagining it. Any minute now, the door would burst open, and his mom would walk in with her gentle smile, followed by his dad with his favorite chocolate bar. But day after day passed, and the miracle never came. No one came for Danny. Other kids in the orphanage avoided him. They whispered behind his back, stealing pitying glances. "There he is, the crybaby." Those words hurt more than any teasing. The caregivers tried to be kind, but they felt like strangers. One of them once patted Danny's shoulder softly and said, "Hang in there, kid. Your parents wouldn't want you to go through this." Danny froze. Wouldn't want him to go through this? So they really believed his parents were gone. That was the last straw. Fighting back tears, he ran to the bedroom and buried his face in the pillow. Why does everyone think they're gone? They're wrong, he thought, biting his lips. If adults give up so easily, I won't. That night, Danny made up his mind. He would run away and find out the truth himself. Quietly, he got ready. He hid a bottle of water, a couple of bread rolls, and a few apples in his worn backpack. He waited out the night to regain strength, and just before dawn, while the other kids slept and the staff hadn't come on duty yet, he climbed out the window. He walked the whole day back to the edge of town, constantly looking over his shoulder as if someone might be chasing him. His heart pounded, but his determination kept him going. By sunset, tired and freezing, he finally reached the place that used to be his home. What he saw broke his heart: charred remains of the walls, piles of collapsed beams, and the only thing left standing was the old shed nearby. The same shed where they kept tools and where his dad stored potatoes and canned goods in the cellar below. The ground around it was scorched, and there wasn't a trace of the cozy life that once was. Danny's chest ached with grief, and he sat for a long time on the rotten step of the shed, staring at the ruins as evening clouds gathered above. He found neither his parents nor any answers, just emptiness. Hungry, exhausted, and desperate, he hid inside the shed, hoping to make it through the night somehow. And now darkness had completely taken over. Danny was trembling, whether from cold or from the quiet sobs he tried so hard to hold back, he couldn't tell. "Mom. Dad," he whispered into the howling wind. "You couldn't have left me. I'll find you. I promise." He kept sobbing, his face buried in his knees. The smell of damp wood and ash filled his nose. It felt like the whole world reeked of loss. Suddenly, he heard a dull thud, like something heavy had fallen nearby. Danny flinched and lifted his head. The shed was dark, only a faint beam of moonlight came through the broken window. His heart started racing. Had someone found him? Or was it stray dogs rummaging around? Then the sound came again, clearer this time. Danny realized it was coming from beneath the shed floor. Under the wooden planks was the old cellar, accessible through a hatch. His dad used to go down there all the time to grab potatoes or jars of pickles. Now there was a muffled tapping coming from under the floor, along with a faint, barely audible moan. Danny froze. Was he imagining it? He held his breath and listened. No, it wasn't his imagination. There were definitely weak knocks coming from below, like someone was hitting the wooden hatch with their hand. Danny slowly got up on shaking legs. His heart was pounding so hard it felt like it would burst out of his chest. The hatch to the cellar was in the far corner of the shed, partially covered with debris from the fire. During the day he probably wouldn't have noticed it, but right now a beam of moonlight was shining directly onto the metal ring handle, barely visible under two rotting boards. He took a few steps toward it, stumbling with nervousness, the straw and rubble crunching under his feet. Thump! Thump! The sound came again, a little louder this time. Danny thought he heard a faint, hoarse voice along with it. He dropped to his knees and started frantically clearing away the junk, dragging the rotten boards aside. Fear and desperate hope battled inside him. His hands were shaking so badly that his fingers didn't obey him at first. He cut himself several times on sharp splinters, but didn't care. Finally, the rusty metal hatch was exposed. There was a crack where damp, moldy air seeped out. Danny found the handle and pulled, trying to lift it, but it wouldn't budge. He tapped on the metal lightly and called out with a trembling voice. "Is anyone down there?" He heard movement beneath the floorboards. Then a faint, whispery female voice reached him. "Help, someone, please." Danny gasped. That wasn't just anyone's voice. That was her voice. "Mom," he cried out, hardly believing his ears. His heart jumped into his throat. "Mom, is that you?" A weak moan rose from the cellar, followed by another voice, hoarse, male, but so familiar it made him want to cry. "Danny, son, we're here." Danny nearly fainted. The world blurred before his eyes as he collapsed to his knees, hot tears streaming down his cheeks. A strangled sob broke from his chest. "Dad." "Mom," he shouted, choking on the lump in his throat. "I'm here. I'm going to save you." He yanked on the hatch again, this time with triple the strength. His desperation gave him a surge of power. The heavy hatch began to creak. Danny wedged his fingers underneath, bracing his feet against the ground, and managed to lift it a few centimeters. The stale air rushed up at him. Shining his old phone's flashlight into the gap, thankfully it hadn't died after his long walk, he saw his mother's dirt-smeared face looking up at him, and beside her, his father's hand reaching toward him. They were alive. A sob burst from his chest, turning into joyful tears. "Mom. Hold on, I'm here." Danny looked around desperately. He didn't have the strength to open the hatch completely. Something was jammed or stuck underneath. In the corner of the shed, he spotted a long iron crowbar, the one his dad used to pry open the hatch if it got stuck. Danny jumped up and grabbed the heavy bar. His hands were trembling, his fingers stinging with cuts, but he didn't feel any pain. Rushing back to the hatch, he wedged the end of the crowbar into the gap and pressed down with all his weight. There was a grinding sound as the hatch shifted a little. Danny clenched his teeth and pushed harder, hanging off the crowbar like a lever. "Come on, just a little more," he muttered through gritted teeth. Suddenly, the crowbar slipped, and he fell backwards, slamming his shoulder against the shed wall. Pain shot through him, and his vision went dark for a moment. But then he heard a new sound, the creaking of the hatch opening. He scrambled back and saw the gap was wider now. From below, his father's hoarse voice called out, "I've got it. Push again, son." A hand was reaching up through the narrow opening, bracing against the hatch from underneath. His father was trying to push it too, with whatever strength he had left. His mother was quietly sobbing beside him, whispering, "My baby, my sweet boy." Summoning all his courage, Danny jammed the crowbar back into the opening and pressed with everything he had. The creaking grew louder, and finally the hatch swung open, letting the pale moonlight spill into the dusty cellar. It was open enough for them to climb out. His father came out first, thin and weak, and he reached back down to help Danny lift his exhausted mother. She climbed out last, stepping onto the shed floor with trembling legs before collapsing against the wall, breathing fast and heavy. "We're alive. Thank God," she whispered through her tears, wrapping both arms around her son. "Danny, my sweet boy, you found us." She was crying, pressing his head against her shaking shoulder. Danny felt her tears soaking his hair, and he sobbed too, clutching her frail shoulders. The lump in his throat was so big he couldn't speak. He just kept crying like a little boy, whispering, "Mommy. I knew it. I felt it." He stroked her thin, dirty face as his father sank down beside them, wrapping his weak arms around them both. The three of them sat on the shed floor, holding each other tight, crying with joy, with relief, and with gratitude for the miracle that had saved them. A few minutes later, his father managed to speak, though his voice was hoarse and barely audible. "Son, you saved us. We thought we'd never make it out." He gently patted Danny's messy hair. Even in the moonlight, Danny could see his father's eyes were wet with tears. "We were down in the cellar when the house collapsed. The hatch got jammed, and debris fell on top of it. There was no way out. At first, we shouted and banged on the hatch, but as time passed, our strength faded. We almost gave up hope. How did you end up here?" He was struggling to catch his breath, but tried to stay strong for his family. Danny wiped his tears with his sleeve and quietly replied, "I was at the orphanage. Everyone kept saying you were dead, but I didn't believe them. So I came here." When his mother heard this, she let out a quiet sob and hugged him even tighter. Through her tears, she whispered, "My sweet boy, you've been through so much. I'm so sorry." She stroked his messy hair and started crying again, burying her face into his shoulder. His father closed his eyes, taking in what Danny had said, then whispered softly, "Thank you, God, for bringing him to us." Danny suddenly jumped up. "You need to drink something. And eat." He realized his parents could barely stand and worry washed over him. Looking around, he saw his backpack in the corner. There was still some water and bread left inside. He took out the water bottle and held it to his mother's cracked lips. "Here, Mom, drink. You too, Dad." They each took a small sip, hesitant to take more. The supplies were limited, and they knew their son needed it too. But Danny insisted. "Drink it. I still have some left. I'm not hungry." He handed them each a piece of bread and an apple from his stash. His heart ached as he watched their tired, thin faces. His mother bit into the bread eagerly, as if afraid it might disappear if she waited too long. His father ate the apple slowly, trying to chew calmly, though Danny could see just how hungry he was. Once their thirst and hunger eased a little, his father spoke firmly. We need to get out of here. Your mom needs a doctor, and so do you. With that, he tried to stand up, but his legs were shaking. Danny quickly grabbed his arm to support him. Dad, can you walk? I can, his father nodded. Only then did Danny notice a board strapped to his dad's right leg as a makeshift splint. He must have injured it when the house collapsed. His mother was weak too, but with Danny and his father supporting her from each side, they managed. Danny packed up his backpack and helped drape an old blanket he found in the corner over his mom's shoulders. The night air was cold and could easily make them worse. Slowly, unsteadily, the family stepped out of the shed into the crisp night air. High up in the black sky, the stars glittered, but to Danny they looked like beacons of hope. He glanced back at the shed behind them and thought, just a little longer and... No. It was over now. His mother, leaning on him, looked at the remains of their house and whispered, I prayed and asked God to save you, and you saved us. She kissed the top of his head. Danny squeezed her hand in his warm little palm. A quiet happiness filled his chest, mixed with pride. He had kept the promise he made to himself. He found them. He brought his family back together. The three of them walked away from the dark ruins, supporting each other as they went. They still had a long road ahead, hospitals, police questions, reporters, a new life without a home. But the most important thing was that they were together. Danny glanced at the blackened remains of their house, broken glass shimmering under the moonlight. Sadness tugged at his heart for the life they had lost, but then he felt his mother's hand squeeze his again, warm and alive, and he knew home was wherever the three of them were together. He looked ahead, down the dark dirt road leading toward the nearest houses. A faint yellow light glowed in the distance. Maybe it was a candle in the window of someone kind, ready to help them in the middle of the night. Danny took a deep breath of the cold night air and felt his last trace of fear melt away. A miracle had happened. His mom and dad were back. And now, he would never let anyone separate them again. The distant light flickered, and then moved. It was a neighbor, who had spotted their figures in the dark and was coming toward them to help. Within minutes, shocked residents of Maplewood were wrapping the exhausted family in warm blankets and giving them hot tea to drink. Soon, an ambulance arrived, called by these caring people. His mother, father, and Danny were trembling from the cold, tears streaming down their faces, but they were smiling too. The worst was over. Medical care and a long road to recovery lay ahead. But most importantly, they were together. And that